Welcome, dear students, to EPG Pathshala. I'm Dr. K.S. Nagaraja of Deccan College, Pune. I'm teaching the course Historical Linguistics. In the present module, we take up language relationship and classification of languages. However, we consider this in two parts: language relationship in part A and the classification of languages in part B. Whenever we have languages, automatically the question arises whether they show any similarity between each other or not. So this concept of similarity is a very old one. So we normally try to get data, even the words, because words are easy to collect, and compare and see whether any similarities can be found or not. So in language relationship, the relationship could be at the sound level, at the morphological level, could be at the syntactic level. So, and also it could be just a chance word or lexical level. Therefore, we in this course study the hypothesis of relatedness and which type of relationship is useful in linguistics, in language studies. The idea of relationship between languages is quite old and can be traced to Sir William Jones' proclamation in the latter part of the 18th century. William Jones felt that the type of relationship he found between languages like Sanskrit, Latin, Greek, and others was such that it could not be accounted as due to chance nor due to borrowing, rather should be explained as due only to genetic inheritance. His famous passage is quote-worthy. It is given below. In fact, this was the third anniversary discourse on the Hindus delivered before the Asiatic Society on 2nd February 1786 and published in 1788. Contain this particular passage. The passage runs like this: the Sanskrit language, whatever be its antiquity, is of a wonderful structure, more perfect than the Greek, more copious than the Latin, and more exquisitely refined than either, yet bearing to both of them a stronger affinity both in the roots of verbs and the forms of grammar than could probably have been produced by accident. So strong indeed that no philologer could examine them all three without believing them to have sprung from some common source which perhaps no longer exists. There is a similar reason, though not quite so forceful, for supposing that both the Gothic and the Celtic, though blended with a very different idiom, had the same origin with the Sanskrit, and the Old Persian might be added to the same family. This common source came to be known later as Proto-Indo-European. So, William Jones proposed that Sanskrit, Greek, and Latin languages had a common origin, and that indeed they may all be further related in turn to Gothic and the Celtic languages as well as to Persian. Jones' successors, Bopp, Rask, Grimm, and Pott, continued on this assumption of kinship and descendants and consider the reconstruction of the mother tongue the principal task. When the family tree hypothesis was proposed by August Schleicher in 1871, he was not at all promulgating any new theory of Indo-European relationship, but he was simply presenting schematically the method of comparative philology as practiced by himself and his predecessors. If we list or seek an etymon in an etymological dictionary, our aim is in effect to determine the older form of which the later or present form is a development. The older and the newer form are to be referred to as belonging to two different languages. The indication if a relationship of these two languages in metaphorical terms of kinship is quite appropriate and useful. The statement, if Sanskrit, Greek, Latin and Germanic are sister languages, Hittite is only a cousin, is picturesquely intelligible whether you think it factually true or not. We can assume that resemblances between languages can be of at least four origins. 1. They may be reflections of certain language universals. Thus, it is commonly assumed that the rather frequent occurrence of items like mama for mother may be conditioned in some way by some general feature of the process of language learning. Onomatopoeic words, words of sound symbolism, common kinship terms like mother, father, etc. are also of this type. Second, they may be analytical artifacts that both Latin and English are considered to have a present tense, maybe due to the fact that Latin provided the model for English grammar. The English present tense was established on a scant basis under the strong stimulus of the model. Field linguists aim at describing a language in terms of its own structure. They never quite succeed, and occasionally they fall miserably. Similarities in the results can be mere reflections of their methods or their prejudices. 3. Resemblances may be the result of mere chance. For example, English bad, Persian bad, though they look similar, they have nothing common between them. Modern Greek mati I, Malay mata I. While Greek and Malay are spoken in geographically distant areas, this kind of similarity is just a chance similarity and nothing more is possible. Similarly, modern Persian huri, which meant beautiful young woman, however, in NHG, hure means something quite different, whore. We may see similarities between Sanskrit and English. In fact, the Indo-Europeans say that Sanskrit and English belong to the same family. In fact, English is more like a cousin of Sanskrit because Sanskrit, Greek, Latin are more like sisters. So it will be interesting to see the type of similarities we may find between them. So here is a list of words. Kona in Sanskrit also means corner in English. Jhampa in Sanskrit, jump in English. Taru in Sanskrit, tree is in English. However, it is not the true cognate. The correct cognate in Sanskrit should be the daru. torna, and in Sanskrit is similar to English door. Here also the correct cognate in Sanskrit is dwara. So, for instance, similarly, gati, we have gate, vama in Sanskrit is woman in English. So, this kind of similarities, because of their distant relationship, it is very hard to ascertain whether they are really related or not. The fourth type of relationship we may see is similarities may result from historical connections between the languages. This is the most crucial one. Linguists commonly distinguish, sometimes rather too sharply, between two subtypes in this: inheritance relation and borrowing. Thus, the similarity between English father and Latin pater is an inheritance similarity, since both are assumed to have a direct and continuous descent from a generally similar word in the ancient language, that is Proto-Indo-European, from which English and Latin both descend. But interestingly, the word paternity and paternitas show a borrowing similarity, since the English word is derived directly from the Latin. Another important type of similarity is called shared aberrances. If one can detect a common aberrancy shared between the putatively related languages and characterized by systematic recurrent correspondences, would prove beyond doubt that those languages are genetically belong to same family. Shared aberrances may be morphological, lexical, as in the following instance between English and German. Here we notice a supplation between the roots used for the simple adjective and its comparative and superlative counterparts. It should be noted that supplation alone is not enough, but that the morphemes involved in supplation must be characterized by systematic recurrent correspondences. So, correspondences of this type are found between English and German forms, while though French has suppletive forms, do not show any recurrent correspondences with either of the other two languages. So the examples: English good, better, best, or blue, bluer, bluest. In German we say gut, besser, best, bland, blaner, blandest. So we can see the close similarity between the English and German forms. In French also we have a similar but definitely somewhat different: bon, meilleur, le, meilleur. The way the degree forms are obtained are quite different in French compared to English and German. So English and German have shared aberrances, which in a way is a strong indication that they belong to same group. Interesting regular morphophonemic alternations shared by all the related languages also is of great value in proving relatedness. So here is a small example taking again from Indo-European languages: Sanskrit, Avestan, Greek, Latin, Slavic and Gothic. Here we have taken third singular forms: asti, both same in Sanskrit, Avestan. It becomes esti in Greek, est in Latin, gestu in Slavic, and est in Gothic. In third person plural, santi in Sanskrit, hanti in Avestan, again henti in Greek, where ha is optional, sunt in Latin, Stu is Slavic and Sin in Gothic. As you can see that the morphophonic alternations are very similar in most of those languages. That is a very important feature. The interest and usefulness of these four classes of resemblances are quite different. And the first task of the comparativist must be to distinguish them as clearly as possible and assign absurd resemblances to the proper type. Similarities due to historical connection are of great interest since they only can yield evidence from which historical reconstructions can be made. In practice, comparative linguistics restricts itself largely to attempting to identify and interpret similarities due to historic connection. So the method for discovering valid relationships rests on two main principles: the relevancy of forum meaning resemblances in morphemes to the exclusion of those based on forum only and meaning only, and the technique of group comparison of languages. Operational criteria used in discovering correspondences and cognates are manifold, but most fall into two general types. One, phonetic plausibility, certain pairs of sounds as possible correspondences which are not phonetically similar. Two, recurrence, co-occurrence, correspondence should be there and they should be accountable. Accountability is equally important. Whether the recurrence is regular or not has to be taken into account. Criteria of recurrence should be applied before rather than after criteria of phonetic plausibility. Since this application is basically a matter of counting within a sample and some rather elementary calculation, the criteria of recurrence can be applied by machine. There is thus the possibility that at least a major segment of the work of finding the cognates and correspondences can be programmed onto computers. A list of glosses likely to produce a maximum proportion of inheritance similarities and a minimum of borrowing similarities is known as basic vocabulary. The list of basic vocabulary containing 100 items was originally drawn using English glosses by Maurice Swadesh and was later revised when criticisms poured in. It was assumed that terms for these glosses would be available in all languages and include generally body parts, kinship terms, flora and fauna, lower numerals, etc. Languages are related when they have developed from a common ancestor, and the rules whereby they are derived from the proto-language represent the changes that each has undergone during the intervening period. Two related languages, by definition, share the early rules and differ only in those rules which have been added more recently. The larger the number of such unshared rules or unshared changes, the less closely related will be the two languages or two language systems. Closeness of relatedness can therefore be seen to depend on the number of rules held in common. This, however, assumes that shared rules are only the result of joint development and cannot arise independently in the two systems after they got separated. Nature of shared rules and the relative position in the system should be taken into account before judging this aspect. In this context, a word is used very frequently as a technical term, that is cognates. Starting with a set of word pairs drawn largely from the basic vocabulary, the linguist attempts to sort out word pairs that seem likely to be resembling because of inheritance. A correspondence is a statement that in a certain environment, a given phoneme is in one language will correspond if the words are cognate to a stated phoneme in another language. By lexical resemblance will be meant similarity in sound and meaning of root morphemes, for example, English hand and German hand, both meaning hand. By grammatical resemblance will be meant similarity of both sound and meaning in non-root morpheme, for example, English and German both indicating the comparative adjectives. Both lexical and grammatical resemblances are relevant as evidence for historical relationships. On the other hand, similarity in meaning not accompanied by similarity in sound or similarity in sound without corresponding similarity in meaning may be of negligible value. So here, a family tree has been given as an illustration to show how the related languages can be shown to belong. Here it is from Dravidian language. It's assumed that the languages like Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, Telugu, they all, and of course there are around 20 languages in addition to them, belong to this particular family called Dravidian. In case of Dravidian, we use the word common Dravidian because we do not have a language which can be identified as the earliest form of Dravidian. So from there, we have tried to show 4 branchings, and so this kind of tree diagram is known as a stamp-bam or family tree. So this stamp-bam, the family tree given here, shows schematically the lines of descent and a relative chronology of languages. Of course, this is based on Bha Krishnamurthy's work 2003. When a tree diagram is provided, automatically it gives a visual picture of the relatedness and the type of relationship the sister languages hold between each other. More on this will be discussed later. Naturally, this kind of family tree diagrams or family tree concept has some limitations. The scholar who proposed this concept of family tree, Schleicher, considered this kind of stamp-bam to be natural facts and not metaphorical terms. He stated that each specimen is derived by progenation from some predecessors and ultimately all from some predecessors and ultimately all from some prototype. But he was not right here. Language is no such organism. The problem with the family tree model was that it did not spell out the actual linguistic items defining the nodes. It did not allow for diffusion either, and this then led to the counter model which is known as wave theory. To remedy some of the shortcomings of family tree model, Johannes Schmidt devised an alternative scheme which he called wave scheme, which turned out to be remarkably illuminating and successful. The following questions couldn't satisfactorily be answered by genetic followers. When linguistic agreements in two families cannot be accounted for through inheritance from a parent's speech, how can they be explained? Why is common Indo-European not necessarily equivalent with Proto-Indo-European? How can one explain such resemblances as are inconsistent with those upon which a hypothesis of closer relationship between two language families has been founded? So, wave theory was originally proposed by a scholar known as Johannes Schmidt in 1872. The wave theory purports that linguistic innovations spread from one language or dialect through contact on the part of speakers of neighboring language or dialects, and proponents of the theory demonstrate that languages often share innovations that cannot be attributed to a common ancestor. Two languages, A and B, for instance, might, for example, show reflexes of identical sound changes. A, however, might also show the reflexes of another change that is specific to language A and must have preceded the development that is identical to the one in B. A change common to more than one language, be they related or not, that is not due to inheritance from a common ancestor, is termed as a parallel development. Many well-known innovations can be shown to result from a wave-like diffusion from one language or dialect to another. Umlaut in the Germanic languages, for example, appears not to reflect a Proto-Germanic innovation, but seems to have spread through the Germanic dialects after the period of differentiation. The earliest attested Germanic language, Gothic, does not exhibit umlaut. The process is found in both North Germanic and West Germanic languages. A wave-like spread of the innovation is suggested by the fact that dialects spoken in the south of Germany show many non-umlauted forms compared to dialects spoken in the north of Germany. Here, Schmidt's wave theory provided appropriate theoretic and visual correction by showing that linguistic areas may overlap and that in these overlaps, dialect features may spread as waves do on a quiet pool, so that linguistic agreements may be not inherited but acquired. The pure comparative method, and with it the family tree simile, presupposes a clear-cut splitting of successive branches, but the inconsistent partial similarities show us that later changes may spread across the isoglosses left by earlier changes. It was the great merit of Schmidt's wave theory to provide a visual scheme entirely different from the family tree, which could plainly and correctly account for the overlapping of isoglosses and explain inconsistent partial similarities. Now, if the family tree device corresponds to one aspect of the modern comparative method, the wave theory presents the other principal aspect of linguistic investigation, namely dialectology or dialect geography. This aspect will be studied in some detail in a separate module. Limitations of wave model. The wave theory can only be used to show graphically how at any given moment the relative geographic position of various dialects is responsible for the fact that contiguous dialects may possess in common linguistic features which only one of them inherited directly from the parent speech. No single map of intersecting and overlapping linguistic areas, that is isoglosses, can furnish evidence beyond directional clues for a forecast. As to the historical linguistic developments, these can be gleaned from a series of sketches in which the successive dislocations and the shifting of areas become apparent. Wave theory model also has a problem in handling chronology. It spells out the isoglosses, but they are all on the same flat surface without chronological depth. Seriation can be used, but only for one isogloss at a time, atomistically and without relation to other isoglosses. So, to summarize, this particular module has concentrated on the aspect of relatedness among languages. The relatedness could be spurious, could be genuine. So that is important to distinguish them, then only the fruitfulness of the system will be available. So this particular module is a beginning in this direction to show the relatedness, and further it is this concept is taken in the other modules for elaboration. Thank you.